What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shaped their professional trajectory in life. I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is President of FranklinCovey Education, Sean Covey. Sean was the quarterback of the 1982 state championship football team at Provo High in Utah and went on to become the starting quarterback at Brigham Young University. Sean's father, Stephen Covey, most famous for his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, loved watching his son play. I had the great fortune of being hired by Sean and his siblings to write Stephen's autobiography for the family and to learn from his father how many lessons he believed sports taught his children. Today, Sean is a New York Times bestselling author and brings his competitive fire to FranklinCovey, an organization whose mission is to enable greatness in students, teachers, and schools working in all 50 states and in more than 150 countries.
Most people are not good listeners and they don't know it. You think you're a good listener, but unless you have good intent and you have the skill, it's hard to be a good listener. I think so much of communication is just on the surface because there's no real dialogue going on. Most people listen with the intent to reply. They're preparing their response while the other person is speaking. And when you listen with the intent to understand, it's different in kind.
Sean, thanks for joining us.
Good to see you, Don. So glad to be with you.
It has been. Love the family and grateful for the opportunity to spend a little more time together today.
Thank you.
You know, the premise, as you know, of our podcast here is about how sports played a role in how leaders think today about the way that they lead their teams and work with others. Take me back to your childhood. Can you share a story of the role that MR played in your childhood, or should I say made you play in starting your football career?
Well, I was a good athlete as a kid, like in field days growing up. I was able to go out and win a lot of events. And then I got kind of chubby as a kid for a few years, so I wasn't in the best shape. And my brother, Stephen, was a football player. He was the first in the family to do it. And he came to me when I was going into 7th grade and he said, "Sean, if you don't play football, you're a wimp." And I said, "Really?" I said, "I don't want to be a wimp." And he's my big brother, and I admired him. And so I went out for the football team. And again, I was out of shape and not ready psychologically. And it was the first practice in the summer. It was hot. And the head coach said, "You're playing center." And I said, "Okay." And so I played and I hated it. The coach was yelling and swearing and we lined up for wind sprints. I thought a wind sprint was like a popsicle or something. And he started running us. We did like 20 80-yard sprints. I thought I was going to die. I came home, decided to quit, and came to school the next day. And my best friend, he said, "Hey, you excited for football today? That was great yesterday, wasn't it?" I said, "I'd really love to play, but my dad made this up. My dad said that he doesn't want me to play, so he's forcing me to quit." So I quit after one practice. That was my 7th grade football experience.
And you put it on your 7 Habits of Highly Effective People father.
And I blamed it on him.
Way to go.
Yeah, he never even knew I tried out or anything. He was unaware of the whole thing. If you would have told me at that point, someday you're going to be a starting Division I quarterback, I would have said, "Yeah, right." And monkeys are going to fly out of my nose.
That's funny. And so you quit after that. And what grade is this?
This was in 7th grade.
7th grade. So Stephen MR would have been in...
Stephen MR was 3 years ahead of me, so he would have been in
10th grade.
He was a sophomore. So he pushed me into that, and then I quit. And then the next year he pushed me again, and then I stuck it out in 8th grade. I hated it. In 9th grade, I started enjoying it. And he was a senior when I was a freshman in high school. And every day he'd make me throw because he was a receiver, and I'd have to throw like 150 to 200 balls every day. Over the head, right shoulder, left shoulder, down left, down right, hard as I could, soft touch balls. And I learned how to throw by throwing to him. And then when I went into 9th grade, I didn't want to play quarterback, but they didn't have anyone that could throw. And someone said, "Hey, Covey can throw." So that's how I got started as a quarterback, because I got forced into it. And it was because of all the throwing with Stephen Amar.
But you could have been an offensive lineman otherwise.
Could have been a lineman.
That would have been even less fun, I would guess. Certainly, we wouldn't have achieved some of the things that you ultimately achieved.
Yeah.
You went on, you did play quarterback there at Provo High in Utah. And in your senior year, you led the team to the school's first football state championship.
Yes.
Few people get to experience state championships and all the pomp and circumstance that comes with it. What lessons did you learn on that road to the trophy that you still think about today?
Well, Provo High School had never won one before and has never since. Anyone that's won a state championship, you know how hard it is. You got to get lucky and you got to be good. So many lessons. I don't know where to start. One major one would probably be just the power of teamwork. When we became seniors, we had a good junior year. We lost in the quarterfinals of the state championship. And then before the season began, about 40 of us, this is juniors and seniors, got together without the coaches to set a goal for the season.
Oh.
And we met on a park, no coaches. I mean, it's unusual for kids to get organized, right, without social media. And we said, okay, well, what should our goal be? Well, let's set a goal to win all of our games or win our region. And someone said, let's win the state championship. And that was kind of beyond our imagination. But we ended up saying, okay, let's do it. And we had a great quote. It goes like this: "There's no chance, no fate, no destiny that can circumvent, hinder, or control the firm resolve of a determined soul."
Where did this quote come from?
If you Google it, there's a source. I'm not sure who said it, but I had heard it, read it to the team, and we all adopted it as our theme. And we wrote it down on a 3x5 index card and gave everybody a card. No chance, no fate, no destiny that can circumvent, hinder, or control firm resolve, a determined soul. So we started the season with that kind of togetherness, and we were very cohesive. We were small, but we could throw the ball. We had BYU's offense. My head coach, Frank Henderson, went over and got the entire BYU offense. They shared it with him. So we had their offense. And back then, no one threw much. And so we just destroyed teams. And we went on, won the state championship. We were 12-1. We lost one game by a blocked extra point. But it was a fabulous season. I learned about the power of that team. We stuck together. We're still best friends. We still have reunions today, 35 years later. And it was tremendous. I also learned about comfort zones, and playing football was always so hard for me. I'd get so nervous being on stage. Even as a little kid, when they'd say, "Oh, it's field day on Friday, we're going to have races," I would just go in a knot for a week, because anytime I was timed or had to perform, before every game, I felt like I was going to die. I was so nervous. Even as a senior, after starting for 3 years, you got to just push the limits. But unless you're stretching yourself all the time and living part of your life outside of your comfort zone, trying new things, meeting new people, challenging yourself, new goals, you just don't grow.
Becoming a determined soul, right?
Right. Yeah.
I love it. Those are really powerful, and I can imagine they would be life-shaping for many years.
Yeah, they were very much. And friendships I formed, a lot of my friends were Tongans and Pacific Islanders, and we became really close friends. We still are today.
That's awesome. So then you go to BYU.
Mm-hmm.
And that team had an amazing window in the time period that you were there. The lineage of quarterbacks was incredible. Jim McMahon, Super Bowl champion with the Bears. Steve Young, 3-time Super Bowl champion. First ballot Hall of Famer. Ty Detmer, Heisman Trophy. Then you get this guy, Sean Covey.
Have you ever felt like you're the answer to a trivia question?
Sometimes.
But you did beat out a Heisman Trophy winner in your year as a starter, right?
Yeah, that's my claim to fame. I came after Steve Young. He was a senior when I was a freshman, so I learned under him. I went on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in South Africa after my freshman year. While I was there, BYU won the national championship with Robbie Bosco, who followed Steve Young.
Right. I forgot.
I came back, and then I was in the starting job right after Bosco, halfway through my sophomore year. And then my junior year, Ty Detmer was my backup, and we went head to head because he was really good. I'd started the year before, but he came in, and Ty was just so good at reading defenses, right? His dad was a coach, and he had just grew up with football his whole life. So I went head to head with Ty my junior year and beat him out for the starting job and played that whole year. We had a pretty good year. We were 9-4, went to a bowl game and beat Colorado in the bowl game. At the end of the year, blew out my knee. So I had ACL surgery in the off season. Back then, I had to play actually the last few games without an ACL. They just taped me up and braced me. So I went in to surgery. By the time football came around the next year, I wasn't 100%. I wasn't ready to go. They put Ty in. By mid-season, I was ready to go, but they put Ty in, and he did really well and went on to win the Heisman. So it kind of was a hard ending. I could have gone and played in the pros, but I guess I kind of lost interest after that and went a different direction.
Yeah. We've already mentioned BYU. It was led by a Hall of Fame coach, Lavelle Edwards, right?
Yeah.
The legend in his space. 29 seasons, 257 wins. Now the field is named after him. Now BYU wrote a wonderful piece on him talking about the calm, awestruck demeanor that belied his competitive nature and that jovial spirit. So can you tell me a story about his competitive spirit and how you saw it come to play?
So Lavelle was, what made him great was a couple of things. One, personal relationships with players, right? He'd spend a lot of time not at practice. He'd go and pick people out of practice and come sit down and talk with him. They developed this relationship with him, especially kids that maybe didn't have the best backgrounds or the best home experiences, and he would just take them under his wing and become their father figure. So people would die for him, right? You wanted to play for him because you loved him. That made him great, and he had this relationship with everybody. He also was really good at delegating, right? He let his coaches coach. And some people would say, well, geez, I mean, how much was he really leading? Well, he was leading by saying, you're empowered, offensive coordinator, Norm Chow, call the plays. I trust you. A couple of quick stories. One is I remember when I first won the starting job, and he called me into his office and said, hey, you're going to start Saturday against Air Force. They're ranked nationally. It's on national TV. Don't blow it.
Hey, there you go. That's how to fire you up, right?
No, but it was, but he did it in a really kind manner. And he's basically saying, you can do this. I trust in you. And he gave me the feeling of, you've got this and you can do it. He said tongue in cheek, don't blow it, right? But he was fiercely competitive. He loved to win. And it was really uncomfortable around practice if we didn't win. That's why we kept winning. It was so miserable if you lost the next week at practice. It's like, let's not do that again. It's just easier to win. He was a real competitor, but he was loved by other coaches too, because he wasn't a jerk. He wasn't overly competitive in a negative way. Everyone loved him. I mean, it's unusual for a successful coach to be loved by other coaches, right?
Yeah.
You can look at some of the great coaches today, and a lot of them aren't that loved by other coaches. They've got a lot of nasty things said about him. Lavelle was loved by everybody, including University of Utah coaches, our big rival. He always had a great relationship with people, and extraordinary man.
Awesome. Good. I know your dad, Stephen Covey, is most famous for his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He also loved coming to your games, MR's games, your games. Can you tell me a story of a time when your parents went to the ends of the earth to attend one of your events?
Yeah, I remember. So I was a freshman at BYU. And at the time, BYU had a JV team, and we would play really powerhouse junior colleges. So we were playing Rick's College, who kept winning national championships, from Rexburg, Idaho. And they had Jason Buck on the team, who won the Outland Trophy a couple years later at BYU. My dad didn't want to miss the game. It was a JV game, right? So no big deal. But he flew across the country, got there just in time, made a huge effort. I remember just being so thrilled that Dad had flown across from back east and made this a priority, and had a car pick him up right at the airport at the exact time so he could be there. And he got there right before the game started. And we got killed. I threw 3 interceptions. I got sacked like 8 times by Jason Buck, the Outland Trophy guy, and just got pounded again and again. I was so beat up. After the game, I met Dad in the waiting out of the locker room. He was there and he hugged me and he said, "Sean, you were amazing today." I said, "What?" He goes, "That was the best game I've ever seen you play. I've never been so proud of you." And I said, I suck, Dad. I know that stats weren't good and you didn't win, but you've never been so tough. You were getting killed out there, and I could not believe the way you kept getting up again and again and again. I've never been so proud of you. And I thought to myself, I didn't think anyone could make me feel good after this game, but he just did. He was really good. In high school, Don, I remember one time I caught him on the phone. He was calling the city, and he was saying, "I'm planning my travel schedule around my son's football schedule." And they're like, "I'm sorry, Mr. Covey, it's 18 months out. We don't have the schedule in place yet." He was a busy man, traveled a lot, but made family his top priority. Never missed a game.
I have to say, I love hearing, like, when you say that, Sean, you're fantastic today. I mean, I can hear your dad,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I can hear his voice, and that's extraordinary. Sports Illustrated wrote about your experience in South Africa.
Yeah.
On that mission trip when BYU won that national championship in '84. How often did you pick a football up while you were away? You're there for a different purpose, but you were a quarterback on the team with Steve Young as your senior leader the year before, and now you're on this mission trip. Tell me about that.
Well, it was something I always wanted to do since I was a kid, even though I had a chance of starting the next year, right? Steve Young was leaving. I thought, I got to do this. I've always planned on it, and I have a strong belief and faith in Jesus Christ. I wanted to go out and talk about him. So went to South Africa, learned Afrikaans, and it was hard because people kept sending me articles about these big victories BYU had. They were undefeated and win the national championship. And I'm thinking, did I make the right choice? You have one day a week that we had off because you're working pretty much the whole time. And I brought a couple footballs, and I threw the ball maybe 12 times the whole time. And I got weaker. My arm didn't feel so good. And so I just kind of gave up after a while and thought, I'll work out when I get back. But it was a neat experience. Wouldn't have traded it for anything. It made me, I think, a better football player when I got back because I was more determined and more disciplined. When BYU won the national championship, Sports Illustrated discovered that a lot of the players on the team had served missions, including Glenn Kozlowski, the star receiver. They asked him, who's going to be the next quarterback? And he said, I think it's going to be Sean Covey, because I threw a lot to him when I was a freshman. And so they decided to do an article, and they found 3 players, myself and 2 others, and they sent Sports Illustrated reporter, Gary Smith, still remember his name.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He came out to Cape Town and lived with me for about 5 days just to get a feel for what it's like being a missionary, and wrote this article about BYU and its unique mission program, right? And how it helps or hurts program. There's so much interest in BYU at the time because of the national championship that it was a story of interest. But it was pretty cool. Put a lot of pressure on me, though, when I came back. High expectations. Steve Young, Robbie Bosco, national championship, Jim McMahon. You're next.
No pressure there. Now, in fact, in that Gary Smith article, Gary was one of the great writers ever. Right, at Sports Illustrated. He actually says that you actually asked your parents to stop sending you articles about BYU's championship because it, there had to be that feeling, as you said, did I do the right thing?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Yeah, I did, because It was hard. I mean, you can imagine the papers, right? They're obsessed with it. So they'd send me them thinking I was enjoying them, and it was just like a knife to the back.
Wow.
So I just said, yeah, no more articles. Just save them. I'll read them when I get back.
Yeah. Coach Edwards, I know, pushed you, right? But was there someone else on that sports journey whose story or the lessons they taught you are things you think about even today?
My high school football coach, Frank Henderson,
Mm.
he was fabulous. I was scared to death of him. He was a big guy. He could bench press 450 pounds.
That's
And
a funny pair of lines there,
yeah,
right? He was fabulous. I was scared to death of him.
right. When you're a kid and you're 16, 17 years old, coaches are scary. It's authoritarian, right?
Right.
But he also believed in me greatly. And as a sophomore, he put me in the very first game. I was 15 years old, varsity game, and the score was tied. And he puts me in for the last drive. And we made it all the way to the goal line, and I got stuck and we lost. And then 2 games later, he started me as a sophomore. And the first half, I was so nervous. I threw 3 interceptions for -8 yards. I was 1 for 8, -8 yards, and 3 picks. And he should have pulled me. And he just said, he came to me and he said, I'm sticking with you no matter how bad you do, because I know what you've got in you. I came out and I played really well, and then had a really good season as a sophomore and then junior. And then we won the state championship my senior year with Frank Henderson. But if he would have pulled me that first game, I mean, my life could have been much different.
Yeah.
Seriously, because I was not confident at all as a quarterback or a football player. I had some talent, but I did not have confidence. And he was so good that way with me. And he would take so much time with me, teaching me how to read defenses, sit down on paper, and we'd spend hours going over film, just he and I, one-on-one. And again, you don't communicate a lot as a kid, but many years ago, about 20 years after I left Provo High School, I called him up and I said, Frank, you just need to know what a difference you made in my life. And we met, and he was so grateful, and I was grateful. But I guess the power of somebody believing in you, giving you a second chance, sticking with you when you fail was a lesson I'll never forget.
Yeah. The premise of this podcast is that a disproportionate number of Fortune 500 executives were actively engaged in sports at high school, collegiate levels, and
Yeah,
that experience helped shape the way that they lead even today. Do you agree that being an athlete made you a better leader?
absolutely. Sports has made me a better executive for sure, because overall, I learned mental toughness. I learned how to, you know what, you got a big deadline coming up. There's a lot of pressure. I got used to it.
Mhm.
My son this morning, I said to him, he's in two-a-days right now. I said, there's nothing worse in life than two-a-days. And everything after this will be easy. I promise. Just get through it. You'll make it. You only have 3 more days. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I just feel like playing football, and especially playing at the collegiate level on national TV again and again, Division I school, the pressure, it put me so far outside of my comfort zone, right? It just made me so much more mentally tough that now being in the corporate world, there's deadlines, there's pressure. We're a public company, there's stock prices. You've got to, watching your stock price every day, a lot of pressure, hitting your numbers, hitting your quarters, a ton of pressure. You don't do well if you're not mentally tough and if you haven't been through some hard things. And so really prepared me well. I mean, I look back on my college education, and I think half of it was playing football and the other half was everything I learned as an English major. And then I got an MBA later. But I'd put football as equally important for my business career because of discipline, mental toughness, teamwork, getting outside of your comfort zone, being able to suck it up when it's hard.
And FranklinCovey team, you've got so much going on there. You're hiring team members as you grow. Does whether or not someone has participated in sports catch your attention?
Yes, I do notice when I'm interviewing people. I hire people all the time. It's a big deal if I look down and you were a state champion swimmer. I know what that means. I know that means that you spent thousands of hours early morning getting up when other people were sleeping in and sucking it up, and you've got great mental toughness and capacity. So absolutely, it's a big positive, and I take a double look at these people.
Yeah. Now we're going to pivot to learn a little bit about how some of what sports taught you applies to your leadership today. Would love it if you could share a story where a leadership lesson learned from Coach Henderson or Coach Edwards or someone along your journey influenced a decision or choice that you've made since becoming president of FranklinCovey Education.
So many to choose from. As president of FranklinCovey Education, every year we are setting all kinds of goals. One of the goals that we set, we have a program called Leader in Me, and it's a whole school transformation program. We go in and we teach children leadership. It's like a curriculum. Elementary school will teach reading, writing, and math. And then on top of that, we say, okay, and learn leadership, learn how to get along well with other people, how to set and achieve goals. And this is what we do. And what I've learned is my most important role as a leader is to create clarity, vision, and strategy of purpose. And so I can get so into the weeds, sometimes I have to pull out. And I hired an executive coach a while back to help me. And he kept saying, Sean, you're doing far too much in execution. You've got to get more into people and strategy. So I look back on Coach Henderson and Coach Edwards. In particular, Coach Edwards was so good at vision and so good at just setting overall strategy, right? So I look back and think, what did Lavelle do that I could imitate here? And I'm thinking, delegate, empower my team members. And sometimes when you're the boss, it's so easy for people to stop giving you feedback, to defer to you. So I always go into meetings and I'm thinking, okay, there's 6 of us here. I don't want to talk more than 10% of the time. Because I've been in a lot of meetings with leaders that are talking 80% of the time. And a lot of times people ask questions and they're waiting to hear, what does the boss think? And I'm like, I won't say anything. Sometimes I just pull back. Sometimes I leave meetings on purpose just to let people take over. So Lavelle taught me how to delegate, how to empower my coaches. I think about that all the time, the way he just, Norm Chow, you're going to call the game. And guess what? I might come in for 2 plays on a 4th down to get my opinion, but you've got it. Just think what that does for Norm.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I feel the pressure, but I feel the responsibility. And that's why I believe we had the leading offense for 2 decades. We were always in the top 2 or 3, led the country many times in total offense, because of just the empowerment. So I try to empower my people. And then also, he was such a good visionary. He used to get up at the start of the year and say, hey, everybody, we have a chance to be a very good football team. And the night before every game, he would talk about the goals for the game. He'd talk about the goals for the year. He was so good at setting vision. And his vision was always, he always wanted to win the WAC or the Mountain West, right? That was number 1, always. We had goals for every game. We want to get 300 yards passing, 150 yards running, 450 total yards, 28 points.
It was that granular.
Every game.
Wow.
We had yard goals. We had point goals. We had win goals. And he always wanted to win the bowl games. So I look back and I was very influenced by his ability to delegate and by his vision and his kind of high level, I'm not getting in the weeds, but high level goal setting and vision. So we have 3 goals every year, WIGs, we call them, instead of PIGs, which are pretty important goals. WIGs, wildly important goals. We have 3 every year. We have 3 this year. Our fiscal year starts on September 1. I'll get up on September 1 and say, team, here are the 3 goals. We've developed them together. Here's what we want to accomplish. So I think I've been influenced by that in so many ways and the specificity of the goals that we had.
I love the granularity, specificity of the goals. Question, so you don't achieve a goal or you do? What was the after action like? In the military, they call them after action reports. After you've had a combat mission, you reevaluate. And if you set 450 as your offensive target, but you only hit 350, are you breaking down where you broke down? Or how? Tell me how you learned that and how you apply it today.
Well, learned a ton from football. Every play was filmed in practice. You watched it the next day. Every game was filmed. You watched it several times the next week. You could never get away with anything. And it was miraculous, right? And it was hard. I remember in practice sometimes, or even in games, I would throw a touchdown pass and then get ripped on for it because I made the wrong read. Touchdown, the crowd's going crazy. We're watching it the next Monday in film. Norm Chow, our offensive coordinator, will say, Covey, you threw to the X receiver. That's the wrong read. Look where the free safety is. You should have thrown to Y. You got lucky. You're not going to get lucky again. Thinking, man. So what it did is you just became really careful in a good way. Didn't make you tentative. It made you think. Every play matters. I've got to make the right read. That was just such a good lesson. We have what we call greatness reviews as a company. At the end of every year, we do a postmortem, which is kind of how'd the year go? How'd you do? We're watching game films, so to speak. Where'd you come in? What were your goals? Where'd you come in? How come? And we call it a greatness review. We also call it a rack review. You're on the rack getting stretched, right? And we do rack reviews and we overturn every stone. And it's really good because you're going to have the review. It creates accountability, but it always turns positive, right? It's kind of dissecting everything you did wrong. And then what are we going to do differently next year? You set your new game plan. So we did that in football all the time. Coach would sit down with me and said, so far this year, here's your completion percentage, TD to interception ratio. Here are the top plays. Here are the ones that we're not doing so well on. And here's our game plan for next week. And, Coach Norm Chow used to say, you're really good at these curl routes. That's your go-to play. Or you're really good on play 65. These are your 4 go-to plays, and learn that about you. We're going to go with these in difficult moments. And at work, it's kind of the same thing. We are constantly reevaluating how people did in the game, at the end of quarters, the end of years, but we're resetting the game plan. We also try to play to people's strengths and just say, hey, you're really good with districts. You're really good at single schools. I'm going to focus you on going after big districts, and you're going to go after single schools. And I think that's another really important thing I learned from playing football is every year we'd adapt the offense to the strengths of the offense. We had a general philosophy of throwing the ball, but boy, if we had 2 really good tight ends, we're going to go with the 2 tight end offense a lot. So adapting to the players you have on the field is so important in business as well.
Yeah. One more question here. We mentioned your father, one of my favorite humans on the planet, best known for his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Your favorite habit, as I've listened to you over the years, is habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. In other words, listen more than you talk, as you were mentioning earlier for some meetings. Can you share why that's your favorite habit?
Because it's the key to relationships and the key to communication. Most people are not good listeners and they don't know it. You think you're a good listener, but unless you have good intent and you have the skill, it's hard to be a good listener. I think so much of communication is just on the surface because there's no real dialogue going on. Most people listen with the intent to reply. Mm-hmm. They're preparing their response while the other person is speaking. And when you listen with the intent to understand, it's different in kind. And again, as leaders, the very thing that made you successful as a leader to get to that point, like empathy and good relationships with other people, oftentimes when you get into a leadership role, those things go out the door because you're the boss and everyone defers to you. And after a while, you get these blind spots because you're not listening well. So I love it because it's difficult. And most people don't know how to listen well. And the best way to listen is to reflect back in your own words what the other person is feeling and saying. That's the skill. So, for example, the other day, my wife said to me, my mother is staying with us this weekend. And I said, okay, why are you so upset? Because I know you won't like that when I tell you 2 days away and you don't like to be surprised. And I don't think you'd like it when my mother comes. I could tell there was something deep there, right? So I just said, okay, I had good intent. I want to understand why you're feeling this way, honey. So you're upset about how you think I don't want your mom to come. Is that right? Yeah, I am, because we always spend so much time with your family and not enough time with mine. So reflect back what the other person is saying and feeling in your own words. So you feel that we spend a lot more time with my family than yours. Absolutely. Haven't you noticed? And none of my family is around. It's really hard. Your sisters have your mom and each other, and I have nobody. My family's all over the country, and yours is all around here, and it's just not fair. So it's really upsetting to you to not have your family around. Yeah. So this went on for a few minutes. I listened. I had good intent. It got to the end, And I said, so you feel this way and this and this, and you feel like we don't spend enough time with your family, and you feel like you miss your family, and you feel like I resent it when I'm with your family. Is that right? That is. For the first time on a jugular issue that was going on for years, I never really got to, she felt understood. And we resolved it because we just said, okay, here's what we can do differently. Because I don't want you to feel this way. And I want you to feel that we love both families and spend good quality time with both. And it even influenced getting her sister to move here. Now she's got a sister that's just a few blocks away. And so that's what I mean by being a good listener is anytime there's a jugular issue, an important issue, a deep relationship issue at work or at home or with your spouse or partner or your teenage daughter, reflect back what the other person is saying and feeling. Such a powerful skill. My dad used to talk about it all the time, and he used to do role plays with big groups of people. And he would play the role of a teenage son that wanted to drop out of school. And he'd have them play the role of the father or the mother. And he'd role play in dialogue. And they couldn't get it at first. And he'd keep going and say, no, reflect back what I'm feeling and saying, why I want to leave school. And gradually they would start being empathic, and he'd teach them how to do it. And they'd realize after they got down in the role play that the son wanted to quit school because he just took a test. And even though he was a senior in school, he was reading at a 7th grade reading level. And he was embarrassed and ashamed by it. And the crowd never would have got there had I not practiced empathic listening, right? So he used to do this, and it would just transform. It'd take like 40 minutes, it'd transform the audience. And they'd go away thinking, oh my gosh, I am the worst listener. I never knew what you meant by listen well to another person until now. I used to leave those meetings thinking those leaders will never be the same. It'll transform how they listen at work and listen at home. So habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood, is magic, powerful. It's principle based. It's all about the idea of if you want to influence another person, you have to first be influenced. And it's counterintuitive. It's not more persuasion, more me, more my point of view. It's the other person does not give a crap about what you're saying until they feel they're understood.
Yeah. Sean, as I said at the beginning, you have been a great gift into my life, as has your family. I love that we get this extra time together recording today. Today, your gift got to be shared with so many others. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to putting this out there and letting the world absorb more great content from you. I appreciate you, Sean Covey.
Thank you, Don Yeager. Appreciate being with you, and I loved all your books. I love the way you integrate business with sports. It's exciting to me to be able to share. I haven't talked about my high school football days in years. What a kick.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks, bud.
Thank you.
Legendary BYU football coach Lavelle Edwards was known to delegate key decisions to other members of his coaching staff. I loved listening to Sean explain the environment of trust and empowerment that this created. If you're a leader within your team, I challenge you to entrust a member of your team with at least one key task or decision with clear expectations. Belief and trust go hand in hand. You must believe that the members of your team are capable of doing their jobs and trust that they'll actually complete the work.
Thanks for listening to the show. Did you like what you heard? If so, subscribe to the podcast. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday, and you can be the first to listen. Subscribe on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com, or by texting subscribe to 58885, and you will receive a free chapter of one of my best-selling books. While you're there, remember to join the Greatness community. For a free weekly leadership lesson, I write for Forbes.com and information on my live and virtual keynote speeches. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Finally, are you a corporate competitor? If so, tell me the story about a time when your athletic experience taught you a leadership lesson you still use today. Until next week, I appreciate you.